Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Addiction and the Three Principles. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Amanda O'Shea on board. She is really doing some great work in the addiction field using the three principles. And I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to Harry to do his introduction for her because he knows her a little bit better than
I do. Thanks, Greg. One of the interesting things when I talked with Amanda was a scenario that perhaps other people will be exposed to. Is Amanda is a three principles practitioner working in a 12-step program, a very ritzy 12-step program that is successful and maybe expanding even into Scotland, where she's the head of the clinic there. Is that correct, Amanda? Head of the clinic?
It is indeed.
Yeah. And so it brings up a very interesting scenario for many people in how you are a three principles practitioner, still maintaining your integrity for what is true to you and what you know will help people, and yet work within a system where it's more the status quo 12-step program. And that challenge Amanda seems to have handled really well. She's grown within that. She's maintained a positive attitude within that, and she's seen how to be happy and full of love while she's involved in it. And her topic is, in my mind, love as a healing lubricant to addiction. And this is the word that personified in the way she was expressing things. And I think that answers a little bit of the question of how those two worlds come together. If you have a feeling of love in your heart, you never have trouble being part of the world. And if you have a feeling of opinion, or I'm better than they are, or I know better than they are. And I want to emphasize that because Sid was very, very adamant that if you started comparing, you're better than something else, he didn't like that at all. He was very strong on that. So with that in mind, Amanda maybe can explain a little bit of how she's been able to melt the two worlds and a few of the things that she has, with a few funny stories to add to the seminar or group.
Oh, bless you, Harry and Greg. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be talking with you guys and everybody else who's out there. Yeah, I'd love to share my story because, it's just, we can't make it up, or we do make it up, right? How this all works. But it's how I got to become to even working at Step 1 Recovery is just, it's a story in itself, really, that I found myself in a position last year last February, where actually I went out for a walk with my dogs, and when I came home, my house was on fire. And I had just become friendly. We'd just been up to do a talk at this local sort of recovery centre that was quite newly opened in a small town here in Spain where I live, a town called Javia. And I don't think that I would ever have gone to work for somebody else, because I've always worked for myself. That was never on my agenda. And it's like life just took over, just took over. And funnily enough, one of the first people that I spoke to afterwards was the owner, the founder of Step 1. And he said to me, "Don't worry, I'll give you a job, find you somewhere to live." And it just happened. It just happened. And the head of clinic there just happened to have handed their notice in the week before or left. And that's the way it was. So I love, in a way, I love that. I love, we talk about this a lot, watching life just play out. And then you see it, you see it in front of you, really, really happening. And so I was kind of thrown in, and it just happened. And I won't say that it's always easy. Having an understanding that I see is absolutely life transformational and quite easy and quite simple. Sometimes, at work, I think, wow, it could be much easier. It could be much easier than this. And I think what happened for me was I thought that this is what happened. I think I was going to go in there, I was going to share it with all the staff, they were going to be blown away, and I thought that we were going to sort of turn it into a Gulf breeze. You know, that's where I was at. I think that was my kind of, and that didn't quite happen. You know, that didn't quite happen. But I'm really, really grateful to just to have the opportunity. And the owner, you know, he's a guy who has come through the 12-step program. He is, you know, he loves the fellowship. He's a big part of the AA world. But he's never, ever stopped me from doing my thing. And it's funny because at the very beginning, I had a bit of thinking over, I need to be careful here. I need to, you know, I need to just kind of drop this in slowly. And I need to make sure that I'm not seen to be trying to, you know, say that what I'm sharing is better than, or comparing it or anything like that. And I was quite careful. And I was almost acting in a kind of secret squirrel way, you know. I was just dropping things in. I was leaving books around the house, and you know, in each we've got we're a 9-bed facility, and we have 4 bungalows and 5 suites. And there was just, you know, the Enlightened Gardener was in one, the Missing Link was in another one, and Somebody Should Have Told Us was in another one, and that's how it was, just sort of, you know, darted around the place. And it was sort of a very slowly thing that just happened. And I remember one day, sometimes, you know, on the program I'd put something on, and I remember, you know, my boss sometimes would say, oh, there's too much of that love stuff on the program. We need more addiction, you know, on the program. But it just happened. It just slowly. And what was really beautiful, because it is it's residential, there was never any pressure to, I don't know, try and get anything across, you know, because you've got people there for quite a long time. It's not like seeing people for an hour or an hour and a half or even a morning. So those little chats could just happen at breakfast or around the house or going for a walk. And I remember that one day we had a lady who was coming in just for a week, and she didn't have any sort of substance addiction. She had a lot of thinking going on. She'd had sort of problems with her husband, and I knew that there was something inside me that I just knew that she was, you know, perfect for hearing what I had to share. And something inside me just sort of said, right, I'm going to just do a week. I'm going to do a week of sort of, you like, principle-based workshops, and I'm going to invite all the staff, and this is how it is. And if I can't do this, then I can't work here. And that's what I did. And nobody said anything about it, and nobody, you know, contested it, and we had this amazing week. And actually this sort of lady who, she had a really sort of amazing turnaround or transformation. But what was really nice was that all the staff got really interested, and that was really, really nice for me. And then, you know, slowly, I don't know, I felt, I got to see, wow, I'd stopped myself really putting so much on the program. I'd done that, thinking that, you know, I'd had sort of speaking to other people that had worked in addiction, and about, oh, you know, just to be careful. And I understand that. I understand the way sometimes that I like to be seen, and that is how I see it, actually, that we complement the 12-step program. And it was after I remember having a really nice conversation with Jacqueline Hollows, who runs Beyond Recovery. And I remember sort of saying to her, oh, you know, if you got any, you know, anything you could share with me, Jacqueline. And I remember her saying to me, which was really wise, was, let the others do the addiction stuff. Let them do that. You don't need to go there. They've got their sort of people doing the 12-step program, and they've got everybody else. Don't have to, just leave them be, and just do what you do. Just do what you do. And so it's so interesting that people, you know, that some of our clients do have quite a resistance sometimes in the very beginning. But the people where I have really, really seen have really sort of taken to what I've got to share. And I always talk about feeling like I've got the biggest secret in the world of recovery. You know, I really feel like that. I really feel that's true. I've really got something amazing to share. But the people that have been around recovery a long time, the people who have been in and out of treatment centers, the people who have, I don't know, you know, keep relapsing, the people who the fellowships didn't quite gel, they never quite felt at home there, people that were never really happy in sobriety, but always believed and were told it's the only thing, it's the only thing, it's the only thing that's going to work. They seem to be the people who have sort of really taken it, and sort of once they've heard something, that they're more, you know, they're hooked, if you like, or they can't get enough, and they're the ones that want to hear more or want to read all the books. And so I really see now that everybody sort of gets an introduction, and that normally starts by me doing some deep listening, and coming in softly. I don't really talk too much about mind, thought, and consciousness unless that comes up. You know, I don't talk about it specifically. It just comes into the conversation. And I now see that I don't really choose to work with anybody that doesn't really want to work with me. And I make that quite clear, and that just seems to work really well. So it's like, if if there's anything that you've heard in what I'm sharing, or, you know, after we've done a workshop, and then people are like, yeah, I'd like to know a bit more. And that's really how it's kind of, you know, ended up playing. But the other day, you know, one of the other counselors was reading The Missing Link in the morning meditation. And that's really cool. And I've just sort of left that copy in there. And it's just kind of happened. And what I love, you know, the other day, my boss, or, you know, the sort of the managing director, you know, I heard him saying to somebody, I don't care whether it's the 12 steps, the 3 Ps, or NLP, or whatever it is. I don't care what it is that gets people better. I just want them to get better. And I'm really grateful for that. So for somebody, and he's never come, he doesn't know anything about what I'm sharing. He doesn't know anything. Because, you know, he feels really safe in his recovery. It served him well. Running a treatment center serves him well. That keeps him sober. And he loves that. And I think it scared him a little bit, actually, to go somewhere else that might shake that in his mind. So whilst he's you know, himself not so open maybe to come and do the workshops or to listen, slowly, even, you know, I've seen a huge shift in him, actually, in the years since I've been there. And that's, you know, so that's just really lovely. And the more that I'm there, the more that I see, you know, I just have to be myself. I just have to stand with that, with the understanding that I have. And a little bit like, it always reminds me of the Modelo story, the Jack Pransky book Modelo. I just see that, you know, innate health inside of everybody that comes in. I just see that well-being. I just feel that oneness, you know, knowing that this can be, this could be any of us. This is any of us. This is all of us, you know, having a different experience. And some days when there is, you know, there are days which feel a bit more challenging. And it's like any group of people, you're with any team or your children, there's some people you just warm to more than others. You know, there are just some people that warm to me more than others. It's funny that sometimes I really annoy people because I'm too happy, you know, and that kind of, you know, when you're in the depths of despair, or when it feels like life really sucks, you know, when it feels like life's really getting you, it feels a bit too surreal that somebody can be so happy. And that's just my natural character anyway. You know, my character was like that before I kind of came across the principles. But I see that too. You know, people have come in, they've been using substances for a long time. They don't particularly trust themselves. They don't trust anybody. They've lived in a world that trust and love and all those things hasn't really been, I mean, of course, it's already been there, but it hasn't seemed like that's the world they're living in, you know? And so to see that soften, to see that come around, and sort of, you know, people don't really know what's happening. There's just something happening. And I love that, because I always say to them, you know, listen, it's not anything that I do. It's not anything that you're going to do. It's just going to happen.
You know what you're talking about sounds so comfortable to me. You're just trusting your own instinctual feelings, and that's, I think, the most important thing when you're working in an environment like you're working in. You have to trust what you're feeling, and then most of the teaching I feel from you is it's spreading out almost spiritually. You're affecting the executive director or the owner of the operation, but it's more through a feeling of confidence that you feel secure in what you're sharing with the other people. And it's amazing. That's the way it actually works. When I teach in a recovery program, my major image is I hope to give them a feeling of hope. And if they catch a feeling of hope, I feel the class is phenomenally successful. And, you know, and I could, like, you keep sharing the way you're sharing without thinking about it, and it's affecting a whole environment. And this man is quite a man. He's given you that opportunity to,
oh yeah,
to
absolutely, absolutely, Harry. I'm really grateful for that. You know, I'm really grateful that we work a little bit differently to some other, you know, recovery centers. We don't have so many rules. You know, a lot of the recovery centers, there's a lot of rules, and I am really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful for just seeing it's just happened. Like, that's about 11 months, or it'll be a year now that I've worked there full time. And you just, I think there is something about my confidence grows in not needing to do anything particular, you know, just letting it unfold, just let it unfold. And that's great. I don't know, you know, I wonder sometimes, working in the world of recovery, it can be pretty challenging. And I take my hat off actually to everybody that's worked in the field for many, many years. I don't know if I, without sort of this understanding that I have, I don't know if I would enjoy it as much. You know, I really, you know, really see that, because it's you know, challenging, right? You're working with people and you feel like they've heard something or whatever, and then people go out and they relapse and they relapse and they relapse. And I think for people that are working within that field, and of course now, you know, that happens too, and that can happen, but you know that's you're not responsible for that. You know that, you know, it's all okay, right? So it's all okay. But when somebody comes in, and, you know, we have clients up there at the moment that have been in like 14 treatment centers or 12 treatment centers, or done 14 detox, and, you know, and when they say to me, Amanda, I've never heard this before, or people say to me, I've been 10 years in recovery, I've never heard this. It's like, you know, and there's something about, I always say, you know, the reason that you think you came in here might not be the reason you're really here. And that is sometimes a little bit difficult for people, because I don't work in the same way as some of the other counselors, and because I'm not so caught up in the story. In fact, you know, it's sort of, that can be quite difficult for some people who have experienced a lot of trauma, and they want to talk about it. And so it's that art of trying to sort of, you know, have when people have been used to something that clearly hasn't worked for them, right? So I hear that a lot. I hear people coming in telling me they've got the best psychiatrist in London, and they've got the best psychologist here and the best something there, and I go, you know, wow, that's really cool, but you're still here. You know, so something ain't ticking all the boxes, you know, and really sharing those stories. That I'm very grateful. I did lots of training with Jack Pransky, and Jack was really, really good at sort of getting the I know it all out of the character of Amanda, and it's still there, right, bit, because that's my character. But I saw that, yeah, I know, really got in my way when I was first introduced to this, and Jack had a really nice, gentle way, right, of kind of you know, and I see that a lot. I see that a lot in work, that people come in and they're there for a reason, because, you know, if you wanted to go on holiday, you'd go on a cruise, or you'd go, you know, you'd go to the Caribbean, or you'd go skiing. You know, people are there because their habits and their addictions and their whatever are not serving them well. You know?
I have a question, Greg. This is for you, Greg, as well. One of the things that I have never understood is we have a class, and you can see that they've heard this tremendous amount. They've changed in front of your eyes, and then all in my recovery program, it's volunteer. They're free to come or not come, and then they don't show up for about a couple of weeks, and then they come back again. And I'm wondering if there's something about the psyche of what or I just don't quite understand how, you know, they have got this, and then it seems like they need a couple of weeks to digest it. How do you see that, Greg? You know, this is my own question for myself, Greg.
Well, I think that's exactly what it is that it's something so new that, you know, when you're first introduced to this, a lot of times it's like, this sounds great, but, you know, I kind of need some time to, you know, kind of compare it to what I already know. And, you know, that whole back and forth. I know when I was introduced to this, it made absolutely amazing sense, but it also seemed crazy at the same time. And it took me a little while. It took me a couple of weeks to just kind of let things sink in and go, you know what? And I actually decided, it's funny, the first year after I came across the principles, I decided I was going to try to prove them wrong. So I spent about a year looking for instances where this doesn't apply, and I couldn't find any. So, I mean, it can take any amount of time. I mean, it's, you know, it just depends on how skeptical we are of different ideas. You know, but for me, I know I was ready for a change. I knew that what I'd been involved in was great as a starting point. But then it's like having only one gear in a car. At some point, you want to go a little faster, and you need to add another gear. And to me, the three principles was like adding a new transmission with all the complete gear set in it. You know, infinite gears for whatever. You know, so I don't talk badly about 12-step programs, because they are helpful for some people, and it was very helpful for me at a time when I needed it. Mm-hmm. You know, it kind of, in my experience, took me to a certain point and then stopped. But, you know, and that was where I came across the three principles, was when I was kind of at that point where I'm like, okay, what now? Mm-hmm. I've gone through the 12 steps. I've gone to all these 12-step workshops and retreats, and I've, you know, worked with 4 different sponsors, and, you know, just, I'd gone through everything, and I was still miserable. I hadn't had a drink or drug in a few years at that point, but I still wanted to put a bullet in my head. You know, and it was such a great thing to come across this. And Bob and Marty are usually on here. They're not on today, but Bob was the first one to talk to me about this. And I thought he was absolutely crazy. It's like it can't be that simple. There's got to be more to it. But like I said, that first year or so, I kind of went out and tried to prove this wrong. And I couldn't find a single instance where it wasn't my thinking creating my experience of that situation.
That's interesting, Greg. Maybe that is what is happening, Amanda, is that they're evaluating this process, and they come back like 2 or 3 weeks later with a fresh mind and a little bit more open to investigating this feeling that we're talking about around mind, thought, and consciousness, and then it seems like the books and everything provide them with what they need at that moment in time, and then they take as much as they want from that. But it does seem like there is that process, because I guess they have a lot of programming inside of their head with all the tremendous amount of teachings they've had from previous programs and so on. And yet we know that one insight can change their world totally. And of course we've seen that.
Look at it this way. we only know what colors are called because that's what we were taught. We only know that this color is blue because when we were growing up, people pointed to that and said that's blue. So people go through 12 steps and everybody's pointing at that wall and saying it's blue, it's blue, it's blue. And then here we come along and say, no, it's really orange.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're saying too.
And they're kind of like, no, it's blue. We're like, no, that wall's orange. You've been misled. You've been told incorrectly. It's still a wall. It's still there, but it's orange. So it can take a little while to kind of look at it again. And one day you end up walking in, you look at the wall and you go, well, I'll be damned. It is orange.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something there as well, Harry, because, I suppose where I'm working, when people are residential, again, you're seeing them, right? You've got them 28, so they're not going back out into the outside world and then coming back in, whereas, they're sort of dipping in and out. And so for the guys that I work with, they're almost cocooned, right, for whatever it is. Normally it's 4, 6, 8 weeks, something like that. I mean, occasionally we have somebody in just for a week or occasionally for 2 weeks. But if people are coming in and they're still as, sort of at the height of their addiction, they've got the detox process to go through. I mean, if they've still got medication in their system, but it's really interesting because I always thought, or I'd always been told, or I'd heard that, okay, people can't hear this. They've got to have clarity. They need to, be off their meds or be off their drugs or whatever it is. But I've had people come in who, I've had a lady come in who was, probably the heaviest detox we had. And apparently, I think it was on day 4 of her being in, she said that she heard, and I don't remember this because it wasn't like she was having any one-to-one sessions or whatever, just, I suppose we forget the way we talk naturally, right? When you're around this, it's sort of, you're talking all the time in normal chit chat or referring to something. And she said in sort of, still in her detox, she heard me say, thought creates feeling. And she'd never heard that before. And she'd been around the world of recovery for 18 years or so, worked in recovery and whatever. And so I was like, wow, that's really cool, because knowing that she was on quite a lot of medication, going through sort of a detox, she heard that.
That's powerful because I remember Barbara Smith, who's works in addiction in the East Coast. She said, it's so nice teaching people that outside circumstances are not controlling who and what they are. And of course, that insight the lady saw, poofs that right out the window. That is definitely, I would say, the psychological side of the picture of addiction, which you talked about. Thought creates a feeling. And then to me, the second part of it is the spiritual connection within yourself. And those two components seem to be a necessary union to oneness and to walking away free-ish, maybe I better put it from the addiction that they're experiencing. Because of course sometimes it has to be like that. Not everybody was lucky like Greg was to have such a huge insight and then be able to see clearly how to walk away from, to walk in harmony with life, I guess would be the way to describe it,
Yeah, and I think like Greg said, when I was first introduced to this, back in about 2012, that first year I was sort of, I don't know, I thought it was something that I'd heard before. I compared it to, I don't know, this or that or the other. And I remember going through that very challenging phase, like, well, if this is how it is, how comes no one told me? How comes nobody told me? And I was very challenging. I was very challenging to Jack, actually. And there was a point, my parents thought I was in a cult, and they still do to some extent. They thought I'd been brainwashed, and because I couldn't stop talking about it. I mean, I couldn't. I wanted to tell the world, right, at the beginning. I just thought this was something that the whole world should know about. But as you settle into that, and as you sort of start to see that the only person who needs to see it really is you, right? You're the only person that needs to see it in any family, in any relationship, in any workplace. What I see now is I see people getting curious. I find myself saying that a lot. Stay curious. Stay curious. Just keep looking in this direction, because it is. If people have come from a world where suddenly this is really this is sort of saying something different. This is saying you've got everything. You've got everything you need in a health model as opposed to a disease model. There is that time where it doesn't make sense for a while, right? It shakes our roots, and that can be really confusing for people too. I do hear that a lot. People say, "Oh, I'm confused now," and I've heard people say, "Wow, you've either gosh, and of course it's not me, but that's how it looks to them, right? You've either transformed my life, or you have completely screwed my head up." And I say, well, it's a bit of both, really. It's a bit of both, really, because it's a bit of a kind of like, okay, we're just gonna, start again, right? We're gonna start again. Yeah. But
I'd like to remind everybody real quick, I just have you muted to keep down a background noise. So if anybody wants to join in or ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself, or in the participants tab, there's a raise hand button. You can click on that. We'd love to hear from people.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Scott.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, it's a funny process. And of course, I think you always go back, sometimes at least I do, on how I picked up on this, it's catching on. I worked up in a medical hospital, and we were on a floor. It was a specialized floor. And we had a psychologist there who was learning about the principles and whatnot. Now, he took it so far and went a different direction. But we'd have these meetings together because there was so much conflict on the floor. One discipline arguing with another discipline and whatnot. And then he would come and he'd be happy, feeling happy. And he would talk, I remember talking about that problems are illusionary, they're not. And this really got me. I mean, what do you mean? We have this problem. How can you say that this is it? But he was so positive. And then I would get these questions in my head, and I would happen to go past his office, and I'd go in and I'd point at him, and I said, then what you're telling me is this. And he would, come up with an answer, and I'd walk away. And again, it's like I'm scratching my head. There's something here. I just don't get it. It's against what I think or what I believe. Then you talk about, this was almost what George Pransky talks about, a defining moment. I went in one time and I said to him, then what you're telling me is blah, 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 blah. And he said, Scott, if I had a gun and it had no bullets in it and I pointed at you, where would the fear come from? And that was almost a defining moment. I had to think about thinking. Okay. And then for some reason that sort of clicked. And then of course, then from that time on, I was listening deeper, became friends with this person that I thought was sort of on the other side, wasn't really sticking up for us or the problems that we were having. And then of course, when I heard Sid Banks talk for the first time, I think it was 2 days after that, then the penny dropped, as they say, and then I had the defining moment. I go, thought, it's just stinking thought. So I think, I always see this if I'm talking with someone. And another thing too is that I've talked to people and they've yesed me to death, and I go, man, am I doing a great job? They're just, they're really getting it. And they got nothing out of it. And then I've talked to people who constantly, they're arguing and questioning, and they're really grappling. They really want to know. I mean, I kind of like that, come at me with the questions and this and that. So again, it's Amanda, what you're talking about, you just go in, and of course, when you're feeling good, you seem to say the thing that you want to say. It's unpredictable in a sense, but that happy feeling that you have, as much as you can have it every day, seems to facilitate the thing that's going to be what they may pick up, hopefully. So.
Yeah, and I think, can I answer to that, guys? Can I just, there's something, as you say there, when that feeling gets picked up, how quickly it's so infectious.
Mm-hmm.
The moment, it's almost like, I can sometimes be standing in a room and it feels like I'm the only one that's seeing it in that moment. But the moment that sort of one more person tends to have that aha moment, or the click, or the shift, it's funny how that ripples.
Mm-hmm.
And it ripples quickly, and that's what I see. The moment that it's almost like just the moment one person sees something like that to be true, it quickly goes around. We're only a small, we're maximum 10 guests really, but boom, one's reading the book, and then they all want to read the book. They all want to read the book, and it's like they jump on the bandwagon, right? And it's just what happens. It's just what happens.
And then they can realize someday, they said, "Boy, Scott, you're having a bad day today, aren't you?" If I'm not up to par. And then so now when they talk about it in their own terms, then they're grasping whatever they're grasping to. They don't say it like I said it. They say it like they're seeing it or they feel it. So it's really neat. I know what you're talking about. I enjoy that, when it has happened.
Yeah. And it's just a gift, right? For me, how I feel, it's a gift for me to be a part of people's journey in recovery, and to take it from recovery to discovery. I talk about that a lot, or recovery from the heart, and to that feeling, if we can drop into that feeling.
Well, what's nice? You're giving them good medicine. You're giving them penicillin, for something. I mean, you're giving them the chance that the other things, as well being meaningful as they were, just, and some people would get well, but you're giving them the real McCoy, the real thing, and that's nice. It gives them a really good chance of, in my mind, that they're pick it up and hopefully will go on and.
There's something that sort of, and the other guys were talking earlier actually about people challenging, and I love that now, that I welcome that. That there's no fear, there's no anything. I love the challenge. I love the challengers. I love the questioners. But what I've noticed that what a lot of people have picked up on is that they've really got something out of witnessing the way that, apparently this comes from them, the way that I, whatever they might call it, handle the room, or the way that I handle really challenging clients. Like, you've always got one, right? That's just how it is. In every family, in every party, in every whatever, there's always that one. And I love it when that one walks in the room, because we learn so much from that one who challenges and who. But I think that's what people have said to be true. They can't imagine sort of not reacting in a negative way if somebody was so challenging and so questioning, and that's cool, right? We just, to standing in what we see to be true, sometimes we don't need to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to say anything.
They start seeing in themselves and what's going on too. It's that inside thing that, as I see it, I understand it, and that's really great, because now they're not looking so much to the outside as to, what's going on with me in this situation.
One of the things, Amanda, that you're talking about that I see in my own reality is it's a process. You're not really concerned with what they're talking about and asking and so on. It's where you're going in the feeling. And once that feeling is arrived at, the answers are self-evident. The collective consciousness is the teacher of what we're doing. So in actual fact, this stuff down here, I actually just kind of see it as the dance, where we're trying to get. I'm not trying to so much answer their questions or deal with what they're talking about. I'm trying to get to a feeling that will allow the the answers to become not only self-evident, but it starts to just pop up from all over the place. And that if I don't arrive at that particular place, I actually don't think the class is successful. I actually feel like we were just dealing with an intellectual scenarios, and it was kind of interesting information. So where we're going whenever we're talking about it is we're unveiling levels of consciousness, and that unveiling brings the answers to it. And of course, at that point, you cease to be the expert. You're just participating in this wonderful dance of love, which was, you know, which I happen to love, because as is self-evident, I become the greatest student in the room because I'm learning from this feeling and breaking through my intellectual perceptions of life and even what I'm doing there. Because you mentioned a very interesting word, and I agree with the word 100, challenging. I love challenging. Greg loves challenging. You love challenge. You have to love challenging if you're in this area. It is challenging. And it pops my balloon because it's challenging.
Yeah, it is, right? It feels like, you know, we're going on retreat the end of this week. I'm going on a retreat separate to the recovery center, and I love down there, you know, on the retreat where there's say 2 or 3 facilitators or 4 of us in the space with 15 people. That's such a different experience than being the only one in the room sometimes, right? But I learned so much from, you know, I learned so much from our guests. And whatever label they've given themselves, alcoholics, addicts, dropouts, you know, I hear them sort of saying, I'm unmanageable, and this and that. You know, I try to steer clear of the labels, but whatever labels they've come in, I love that story where they say, well, I can't do this, can I? Because I'm an addict, and I can't do that because I'm an addict. That's like their excuse, right? It's their excuse all the time. And I love watching that fall away, you know, and working in people, you know, I mean, it's quite unusual for me to be, to have a position like head of clinic when I haven't come from the recovery world direct. So people always sort of, I find that a lot actually interesting. People sort of say, so, you know, so what was your drug of choice, or what was your thing? Because it's sort of assumed. I don't know what it's like over there in the States, but in the UK, most people that work in recovery are in recovery. I mean, that's sort of quite the norm. And so sometimes I'm seeing like
that's pretty typical here too.
Mm-hmm. So I remember finding, you know, sort of, not like I was lying, but sometimes I say, oh, you know, I'm you know, addicted to self and addicted to feelings, or addicted to thinking, addicted to love, and they kind of say, oh, so you're part of the SLA, you know, you're part of that sort of, you're part of that fellowship, and I just let it go. Somehow it's funny sometimes they feel like I'm one of them then, right? I'm one of them. That I'm not on the, you know, and that's funny how they have this, and I really love what I love in the recovery center where I am. There's a mixture. So there's probably most people are actually in recovery themselves, but not everybody. And I like that. I like that blend.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time. I've actually gotten a few messages from people over the last couple of months. They're asking about why we don't talk about the physical recovery part, the actual physical addiction. Mm-hmm. And I don't really talk about it because first of all, it's different for each person depending on what you use and how much you use for how long. So that's a medical thing that needs to be taken care of there. What I'm more concerned about is why somebody would go through that complete detox and go through treatment for an additional 30, 60 days after that, and then immediately go back to using again. That's not a physical addiction at that point. It can't be. It physically cannot be possible that you are still addicted to it. So it's all about the thinking after that. So to me, that's the main problem. Because anybody can go to the hospital and go through detox. and get past that physical part. That's not the difficult part. Not that it's easy, you know, there's difficulty in that, but people make it through that and then make that subconscious or unconscious decision to go back to using at some point. That's more of what we're trying to address here, because that's the real problem. Not that there's actually a problem, but that's the real issue behind it, is the thinking behind it. And I love, I love how you share this with people and get them to that point where they can see that. And I love seeing that light come on for people when I work with them, where they just finally see, oh wow, it is a choice.
Yeah, it's so true, Greg, isn't it? You know, once the physical detox is over, which we talk about really, it's normally, 72 hours if we're talking about sort of the real, is out their system, or maybe if they're on a kind of benzo detox or something, we're talking a week, or we're talking whatever, but definitely what we're dealing with after that. And I love pointing out that fact, or seeing that fact, that, at one stage, the alcohol or the drugs was the answer. That was the answer. And then that became the problem. But we take that away and we see that we're left with a thinking problem. We're left with a thinking problem. So people can go and do detox after detox after detox and get physically detoxed. But if they come out and their thinking hasn't changed, then their behavior is never going to change.
Well, they have a misunderstanding of the role of thought. And until it clicks, they're going to continue to do it, because it isn't a question of just thinking and changing your thinking. Because it's a question, it's thought creates feeling, not a thought creates a feeling. That's the principle. And so the understanding of it keeps, as that understanding grows, you self-correct yourself. And until you have that insight, you're simply going to be a victim, even though you understand it intellectually. And so we see people who have a strong spiritual connection, and then we see people who have they have a strong understanding of thought, but they cannot bring those two to one. And until you bring those two to one, you're still talking spiritual, psychological, and that's not Sid's message. Sid's message is one. And in my own experience of when I deal with my negative behavioral patterns, every time it's because there's a misunderstanding. And to answer your question, Greg, I forget. I simply forget that it's a stupid thing to do.
Right?
Yeah, no offense, but and then I go, oh, right, and every time there's a pot of gold at it. See, that's the beauty of it. You miss, and there's a pot of gold that you go, oh, that's clearer now. Oh, that's the, there's an image in the native world, hollow bones. Your hollow bones, and the more hollow you are, the more the healing power flows through. And that's, obviously, if I go through a scenario, it's not so hollow. It's jagged, got edges that I haven't cleaned out yet. And so it's a very interesting process to clean ourselves out, let alone clean other people out. And I guess that gives me patience, because I've been so slow myself.
It's so interesting, isn't it, to talk about love, as being, when you work in a place of love, it's like fear doesn't exist, all right? Or, when you see love as being, you see the oneness or whatever, that fear is the illusion. But for most of the people that I've worked with in addiction, fear has played just a huge, huge part. Everything is about fear. Even if that fear is, where are they going to get that, where are they going to get Where are they going to get their next hit? Where are they going to get the drugs? Where are they going to get money for the drugs? Where are they going to, chasing the feeling depends. We don't just work with people who are on substances. So, we have people coming in with gambling addiction, sex addiction, love addiction. It's still chasing the feeling. That's how we talk a lot about that, about that's how I see it quite simply sometimes, that the whole world is chasing a feeling without really understanding where their feelings are truly coming from. So they are never going to find it out there. The next hit, the next, whatever it is, the next bet, chasing a feeling, not understanding it. So innocent. There's such an innocence to how this, like I see it, that could be any of us innocently. It really feels real to them. It really feels real that this is at this time when they're reaching for that drink, or they're reaching for the drug, or whatever it is, that feels like the best option at the time. That feels like the only choice at the time. That's all they know. That's all they know. It's familiar. It's safe.
And there's a perfection in that. And sometimes I love looking at it from that perspective. It's not all imperfect.
Yeah. Perfectly imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect. Yeah, beautifully said. Perfect. Isn't that who we are?
So this is a real gift to people. I don't know who's sort of watching this right now, or who's going to be watching this recording. So, I don't know if this is, maybe people watching this are themselves facilitators, or they've just sort of newly been introduced to this, or they're in recovery, or they're thinking about thinking about giving up their substance, or whatever it is. There is not anybody that this cannot help. There is nobody out there that just getting the tiniest, if you can get the tiniest grasp of what's been pointed to, that is enough to change your world, to change your life. And that's huge, right? From this tiny thing is yeah. So it just blows my mind. It still blows my mind, right? Whatever it is, 5 years, still sort of seeing this every day. It blows my mind.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have one question. Could you talk a little bit how you see the role of Sid in this area?
You talking to me, Harry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like going back to the source, right? So there's, I love it's really funny because we've got a cinema room at home, at work, sorry, and I like to put Sid on. I like people to listen to Sid, to have that opportunity to listen to Sid. And it's funny, the other day that somebody said, oh, I didn't come down to the cinema because one of the others told me there was just this boring old Scottish guy doing a talk. That's like it's really funny. This boring old Scottish guy. And so but pointing back to what Sid saw, how Sid saw it, I love talking about that. I love talking about Sid and who he was and where he came from, and the simplicity and the humbleness, and the story about him being just the normal guy, right? Just a normal guy. And then there's just, for me, there's just real gratitude for. And I know that you knew him, Harry, and you're a friend of him, friend of his. And I've only met a few people, I've met Elsie, and I've met Karen and Mark Williams, and I've met those guys who knew Sid. But I don't know. It's funny, right? I feel like he's around. I always feel like that, right? I feel like it's just, it's feeling that oneness, and just that gratitude that he didn't give up, right? So what he saw very clearly, And that passion that he had, it's the passion, right? The passion I find so attractive in what he had to just keep sharing it in the way he did. And it blows my mind that when we look back to the 70s and the 80s, and we're not talking about, we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have, you know, the phones and mobiles, and it's like, how did this get from then to now? Like, I just like, and so from here on, where does that go? It's going so quickly. You know, it's Sid's message. And I know that people might see it, that it's been diluted, or it's been whatever way, because people are sharing it in the way that they can see. So I love that. Always bring people back. That's how I feel anyway. I like people to read Sid's books. I like people to listen to Sid. I like people to hear it from him. I'm really grateful that we have those videos, and you know, and it's amazing now that we've got the sidbanks.com. You know, because the new website, I'm sure that everybody on here is aware of that, but if they're not, that new website with access to those sort of audios and videos being sort of streamed is, you know, I hear different stories. Recently, actually, it's really interesting. I heard a story from somebody that came to a meetup group I was doing here, and her husband had a really similar experience very, very recently. A very similar experience, and we were like, oh wow, she could have been talking, she'd never heard of Sid Banks, she had never heard, or she'd never, and this guy sort of had a very, very similar experience and wrote a book very much pointing to the oneness and pointing to the energy, and then he died very shortly after having this sort of huge experience. And it's like, you know, there are a lot of, I'm hearing that more and more, I'm hearing that, you know, like this kind of Sid type of story, you know, but I'd never compared it with anything before. Like, I hear people comparing Sid's experience with Bill W.'s experience, or I hear people comparing something, you know, with something. And I'd never had any comparison until I was really, you know, 18 months ago in the world of addiction. But that's starting to come up more now. And this lady was saying, you know, my husband was just a normal guy. He was just a builder. And this stuff was coming from him, and we didn't know. We all thought he'd gone mad. We thought he'd gone nuts. You know, and this stuff he was writing. And I think that's, for me, what's really special. I don't know what you were pointing to, but that's just what's come out. That Sid was just this, you know, normal guy that just saw something so clearly that, for me, is changing the world of psychology. So yeah,
and changing your world, and has changed your world.
Change, you know, it's just wow, right? Wow. So yeah, I don't know where that question was pointing to, but I like to point everybody back. That's back to the source, you know. And if you know, Sid doesn't resonate with you, or his voice doesn't resonate, or you can't understand him, or whatever it is, you know, that's fine. But I've found that when they just take that time to listen, I like when we share something up there, I like to put on, you know, one of the talks. They may be only 24 minutes, 27 minutes. I like that. They're quite short. And that's what I hear a lot of people in addiction, you know, keep it simple for us, keep it short. They want to know when their next cigarette break is. That's what they want to know. If it goes on too long, it's just, you know, it's too much. It's that keeping it simple. And Sid was good at that, right? I love those. On that new sidbanks.com, there's quite a few little 2-minute things. There's sort of a couple of minutes, literally just little hits. That's really worked well for me in keeping it simple, keep it short, and just not, you know, keeping the message. Sid's message was very simple, right?
Very simple.
Mm.
Yeah. In a complicated way.
I complicate it anyway. I managed to complicate it enough, but you know, that's okay too. It's all okay.
One of the things I've seen in combining the two worlds, what we see and what Sid sees, is quite often, you talked about that beautiful upgrading, or that beautiful unless they catch that feeling, they're not very open to listening to Sid. And when they if they catch a feeling from what you've been sharing, then they're all of a sudden they're open. You've opened up the portal, and then they're receptive to, I'm not going to say a more powerful message, but a message that whenever I experience it within my own consciousness, I'm limited. I can only, like, I know I have unlimited abilities, but basically there are times when I'm limited. And then I notice when they listen to Sid, it's got more substance. It has more height. It lifts the soul. And but they will not have the lift that Sid is suggesting in 99% of the cases without the fact that they've seen it in you. They've seen it in Greg, or they've seen it in Mark, or whoever it is. And that seems to be our job, is to show them, hey, look, it happened to me, and look at the feeling, and they catch it, then they're very receptive to Sid. They want the books, they want the music, not the music, but you know what I mean, the songs that Sid is playing, and that's always leaves me with a wonderful feeling, because it's love. You know, you're giving them as much love as I can offer, you know, in my humble little abode and my little mind that I have. You know, it's my heartfelt wish that they should really, what you suggested, that they be alleviated from this suffering that they're experiencing needlessly. You know, needlessly. It's why should they be going through? They're such incredible human beings, as you mentioned. Why should they be going through such a hard world and frustrating for them? They know it's not a cool world. They know that. They just want the hope and the message to leave that world behind and join in what we're experiencing. Paradise here in the world. Even with the rest of the stuff that happens.
It's true. I don't know about you, Greg, but I always and you know, I always say that nothing will shock me. Nothing will shock me. And then I go, oh, wasn't expecting that. Oh, that one took me by surprise. Because, you know, the stories, you know, in the past year have just come. It's like working with people that are, you know, that have been involved with or you know, are in addiction, or I mean, I see we're all in addiction. You know, that's how I see it. But if we're talking about people with substances or alcohol or whatever, you know, it's there's some big stories, right? You know, real big stories. And so seeing who people are behind their stories, seeing who people are behind, you know, behind their addiction, seeing that I don't know if some people are ready to let go of that, right? There's a lot of drama in the world. That's why, you know, there's so much drama in the world of addiction. But it feels like it's pretty boring without all that, right? It feels like that's how it is, you know? I had that comment thrown at me the other day, like, oh my goodness, sober life is so boring. I was like, wow, doesn't feel like that to me, you know? I beg to differ. But I get it that it feels like that right now. And seeing people fall back in love with themselves, see people fall back in love with life, see people, you know, where suddenly they're not, you know, it's not coming from a place of fear, but it just coming from a place of wisdom, that it doesn't make sense to pick up anymore, or to drink anymore, or, you know, not from a place of fear because they can't, because if they have one, they're going to die, but it just doesn't make sense anymore. I love it when that happens. I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It takes the struggle away.
Yeah.
There's no more fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Amanda.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I don't know if there's anybody else who's got any questions or wants to say anything or add anything to the conversation.
It's a good place, Amanda. You know, it is right
Yeah.
here.
Good feeling.
Yeah.
I think so. I feel it. I feel that.
And thank you for sharing your
So-
joy to.
How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to contact you?
Well, people can email me. They can email me, amanda@step1recovery.com. And they can, step one with a number one. And if anybody's just, if anybody wants to have another conversation, I'm really happy to have that. If anybody's working in any other treatment centers or wishes to, I'm really, really, open to having that conversation. And have a look. It's really nice to know, right? I think it's really nice to know in Europe that there's a treatment center where you can come and you can be detoxed and also, have this understanding shared with you as part, as your recovery or as part of your recovery or whatever you want, however it wants to be. And that's really, really nice to know. I know about Gulf Breeze. I know about a couple of other places. I don't know if there's any others in Europe. I don't know if there's any other recovery centers in Europe where this is actually being shared as part of the program. So I'm always interested as well to hear from other people what's going on out there in the world of the recovery centers. So yeah, that's where you can find me, amanda@step1recovery.com. And it's been awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you for
So thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody so you can say thank you or goodbye. So it's going to get noisy. Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Harry, Greg, and